everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we're joined by the CEO of PragerU, Marissa Streit. Marissa, love so much about you. So excited to have you on the show. Just tell us a little bit about you. I know that you were born in Los Angeles. You moved to Israel at a young age, and then you came back. Tell me about that, because that's kind of not a standard move that I don't think that most people do.
Yeah, so I was born here in Los Angeles. You can kind of hear the sirens because there's a craziness going on in the streets here, probably issues with homelessness, etc. And when I was 7 years old, my family is actually Jewish, and so we immigrated to Israel, and I was raised there as an American and really got so many gifts out of living as an American in the Middle East, mostly the gift of appreciation of what amazing this country is, right? And sometimes you don't realize how incredible America is until you live outside of the United States.
True.
And so I was raised in Israel. I had a pretty interesting, tough childhood, but I built so many calluses out of it. And I really think that those tough experiences as a child have kind of prepared me for what I do today. I served in Israeli intelligence in a small unit, 8200. I had this fascinating task of working in intelligence and really finding out what are ways that Israel could better utilize its intelligence information and keeping it safe, right? Israel is surrounded by enemies that want to attack Israel. And so one of the things that Israel learned was that it's not only important to have intelligence, but to have a unit within intelligence that is constantly studying what is working and what is not working. And so that is what I did when I worked in the military over there. And I say it has made me kind of an annoying wife, because I walk into a situation at home and I'm like, this is not optimal. That's not optimal. Let's fix it. But as a CEO, and as a person who is so passionate about fixing what is happening in America today, it has given me these special gifts at looking at things differently and developing strategies to problem solve.
Yeah. I'm sure. I mean, I can only imagine. First of all, I love the description, and I don't know why I've never heard it, talking about building up a callus of sorts, because I work out a lot, I run, I do CrossFit, and I know what that means. That means that, yes, you go through something that is challenging, and at the time it's probably painful to deal with, but it actually prepares you, and you build a callus so that whenever you encounter a similar thing in the future, you're more prepared for it. Your body is more prepared for it. It's such a great analogy. Sorry, I got like stuck on that because I was like, that is so smart, and I totally relate to it. But I got to go back to your military service in Israel. First of all, tell people that don't know, is it true that every young person has to serve in some capacity in the military in Israel? Is that right?
Yeah, so in Israel, military service is mandatory.
Right.
And, I learned actually quite a bit from that experience, and borrowing from that experience and bringing it back to the United States. When you serve in the military in Israel, you may be in infantry, you might be a cook, you might be in intelligence, you might be a driver, you might be a therapist. But what I've learned from Israel is that everybody figured out a way to invest in its nation and protect its nation. Yeah. And what an amazing thing that is for young people who turn 18 and realize that the first thing that they need to do before they go to college is to invest in the safety of its own country. Imagine Americans had the same experience, right? Yeah. What a unifying thing that is. I mean, it builds calluses, as I love to say. Mm-hmm. It unites the nation, and it brings this incredible sense of responsibility to the children of the country. And so that is one of the things that I learned, and I wish us as Americans would be able to integrate that into our society, right? Imagine that everybody found a way to protect America, and the way that Israelis, when they're 18, get involved and protect their own countries. And so, yes, in Israel, military is mandatory. And while it may sound, annoying, oh, how could they force people to do it? It is such a gift for these children, when you're 18, you're no longer a child, especially when you're in Israel, you're no longer a child. And so what a gift that is to give that kind of responsibility to these young individuals and really build that kind of personality and character. And it's people.
Well, and all I could think about when I learned that you had served in the military there in Israel, and I've known for some time, because I have friends that are Israeli, it's a mandatory thing that everyone has to serve in some capacity. And you're exactly right. I always think, man, what a positive thing that would be for a country, how unifying, how uniting for people, that yes, you don't have to agree on everything. Of course, we never expect that. But you do have a common goal, which is protecting your home, protecting your country. And it really does unite people, I'm sure, in Israel. And gosh, you're exactly right, Marissa. What a great thing that would be to have here in America. Something like that would unite all Americans, especially a younger generation, because I think it's the younger generation. And I know you're such an interesting person to me, and I want to get your full story, because there's so much I want to talk to you about when it comes to kids. But especially I feel like this younger generation right now in America, they have no idea in so many respects how lucky they are to live in this country, how much harder it is anywhere else in the world that they would go, and truly how advanced we are as a society compared to so much of the world. And I wish that they had the respect for this country that a lot of us do, that I do, that my family does, that clearly you and your family do. It's so sad, though, to me to see that. And I think something like this could help.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, military service is an incredible thing. And then, as you mentioned, we do have a problem in our country. And so you might know a little bit about my background. I have 3 children. I'm also a former educator. I taught every grade, kindergarten through 7th in California, nonetheless. I ran a school myself. And I saw how not only are we lowering the standards every single year academically in all of these schools, but we're essentially eliminating civic education from our schools. And so, our American children are not growing up understanding how unique the American experiment is, what a gift it is to be born as an American. The fact that we focus so much of our curriculum on the footnotes of American history rather than the true story that needs to be told. And I'm not going to say that America has this perfect history, right? Every civilization, every country has blemishes in its history, but overall, America is this incredible place. And here we are raising children year after year, just teaching them about the negatives of America and not having them grow up to be proud to be Americans. Think about what that does to the psychology of the child's mind. Not feeling like they should be proud of their country, not feeling like they should belong to this country. And when you don't feel like you belong to the country that you're raised in, there is hopelessness that is created within the psychology of a child. And, the lack of, civics education or nationalism, frankly, is breaking the fiber of what built America and brought us together. I mean, the fact that patriotism is a pejorative, or that if you hang an American flag on 4th of July, coming up now, if you're in California and you hang an American flag on your window during 4th of July, you might get backlash from your neighbors because you might be called a racist. And in many schools, if people are afraid to send their kids to school with a T-shirt with an American flag on it, I mean, that's just frankly ridiculous. But that is the product of lack of civic education, lack of empowerment when it comes to nationalism and patriotism. And it's a product of our education, it's a product of our media, and I think there are many ways to solve it, but most importantly is that we have to be aware of the fact that it's really a problem.
Well, and I'm glad you used the word nationalism, because that is not a negative term, and somehow it has been misconstrued, obviously, by the mainstream media and folks who are political activists who try to masquerade as journalists, as so many of them do now. They have taken the word nationalism and they have turned it into a wholly negative term. But I mean, it actually is a very positive thing to love your country, to be proud of your country, to, want to explain to other people why you love your country. I don't think that's a negative, but how has it come so far and so fast that we've seen a term like nationalism, Marissa, turned around and used mostly as a negative? These days, if you turn on the TV, it's a negative term.
I know. I think it's ridiculous, but this is how you break down a society, right? If you don't feel like you're proud of your own culture, of your own country, and you're feeling hopelessness, I mean, what is the best way to control a child or a person? Is to basically victimize them, make them think that they're part of a group that is terrible, that they are a victim, that they don't belong anywhere. If you rob people out of meaning, you turn them into weaker. And if they're weaker, you can control them. And so that is what we are seeing. We're seeing that the media and well, not you, obviously, but the majority of legacy media and the education system has been weakening the youth. And by robbing them of a sense of belonging and meaning, they're turning them into victims. And by them being victims, they're more controllable. And that's, that's really what we're trying to do here at PragerU, is to just infuse this sense of belonging. You belong to a country that you should be proud of, and you should teach that to your children, and you should be proud to display the flag. And yes, nationalism is not a negative thing. You should be proud of the nation that you belong to, just like you should be proud of the family that you belong to or the community that you belong to. But once you start building this kind of false narrative that you shouldn't belong to something, then people feel alone. And once they feel alone, they can be controlled.
And not to mention, if you are told that you live in a horrible place and you shouldn't be proud of your country, you're not going to want to fight for your country if you see somebody kind of tearing it down and destroying it. And I mean, God forbid we ever get to a place like that. But I got to tell you, I mean, as a person who is just shy of 40 years old, it seems like in my lifetime, the transformation I've seen, and truly probably in the past 10 years or so in America, it used to be such a positive thing to raise an American flag. I remember in elementary school wanting to get to 5th grade because the 5th graders got to raise the American flag every day and take it down every day. And I thought that was just about the coolest thing out there that I could possibly do. But I fear that we're headed down a path. You're right. People are, looking at this country in a very negative way. The younger generation, they're being taught that in school in so many cases. And if it comes to a place where our country is challenged in some possible way, whether from external or internal forces, to break down our country, I'm afraid there's going to be an entire generation of people who are going to say, why would I fight for a country like this? Why would I stand up against somebody trying to destroy it? Because it's not really great after all.
So true. Isn't it amazing how easy it is to destroy? But essentially that's what the left thrives over, to destroy. It's much easier to destroy. And so as long as you break down the society, I mean, I go back again to something I'm very passionate about, which is education, right? Being a former educator and having 3 children, just the dumbing down of our society, right? Lowering the standards and breaking up the relationships and having this, constant division. I mean, just constant destruction. If you look at the schools and what is happening around our country right now, what a better example there is than how disruptive and destructive this kind of, ideology is, right? As opposed to the ideology of building and teaching children that, yes, they can, and, they should be victors and not victims, and that they should be proud of their society. They should be comfortable in their own bodies. I mean, the recent, ridiculousness in schools, and just yesterday, President Biden signed this executive order where therapists need to affirm children who decide that they've been born in the wrong gender, right? And so there's this new bill where, let's say you're a therapist and you have a 14-year-old child coming to you, and the child says to you, you know what? I'm confused about my body. I think I've been born in the wrong gender. I might be, I was born a female, but I think I'm a male, or born male, I think I'm a female. If you go to a therapist and the therapist says to you, well, hold on one second, let's talk about this. Maybe maybe you're confused. Maybe you're feeling isolated. Maybe you're going through something right now. No, the therapist is not allowed to do that, because if the therapist actually questions the child and doesn't affirm the child's hypothesis that they've been born in the wrong body and the wrong gender, they are considered acting as conversion therapy. And conversion therapy is now illegal. And so as a therapist, you will lose your license if you practice conversion therapy. And so what are the therapists going to do? They're going to affirm. And what can the parents do? Nothing. And so now we're having another one of these, horrendous things against our own children. And so first you rob them of your pride in your nation, right? Then you rob them of a true education by lowering the standards every single year. And now you're robbing them of having any sort of adult experience, supervision, or even mental health care to help you work through these situations. And you just throw them into this future of chaos. That's how you create a generation of victims. And it just upsets me so much, because we have so much potential in this country. We have unbelievable diversity, unbelievable access to education. America is the greatest country on God's green earth. I've lived outside of this country, but if we break our future and we break our children, we will break this great country. And it's just so upsetting to me.
It's just shocking that there's anyone who works in the government who thinks that they know better than a therapist, than an individual that is trained as a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whatever these people are. What you just said there, it's insane, and it's really scary. Depending on where you live in America, it really feels like the parents' rights are almost removed completely in so many cases, that we're not allowed as parents to know what our kids are doing, are thinking, are feeling, because the kids are supposed to just talk to maybe an educator, maybe it's a therapist who now has to affirm that indeed they are, a different gender than they were born, or whatever it might be. It's really frightening, I think, out there for so many parents right now. And my kids are young. How old are your kids?
So my youngest is 4, and I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. And so when I started seeing this as an educator and now as a parent, I'm just going to use a strong word. I freaked out, because I realized that my children and many other children need to be inoculated against this stuff. And so, while I do have to send my kids to school, partially because
you live in California.
But you know what? It's not just in California. This stuff is happening in Nashville. It's in Florida. It's really everywhere. And it's a whole nother discussion of why this is happening. Part of it is what I call the left-wing indoctrination seminaries, which are the teacher colleges. Many teacher colleges don't teach teachers how to teach. They actually teach them how to teach leftism and how to become activists, and then they go around the country to anywhere, including, whether it's red states or blue states, and then they teach our children and teach them these ideas. And so this is really why we started PragerU and PragerU Kids. While it's not a physical university, it is an institution of higher learning, both to help parents and now children. We have programs for 4-year-olds all the way to 104-year-olds. And that is to teach these children and people in general to think critically. We call it nutrition for the brain, because while we'll send them to school to learn maybe some academics and, socialization, which institution can actually teach them the important things that make you successful in life, such as values and character building and grit and tenacity and perspective and, what I call calluses. Who's going to teach them that, right? The parents need to teach that. But if the parents don't really know how to teach it, we want to give parents the tools to learn it and then teach it as well, so that we do have a better future for our country. Because I do think that kids and parents do want to learn these things, and they want their kids learning these things. But, what kind of vehicle can we use to make sure that, parents like us are supported with good values and, educational entertainment that we can bring into our home and essentially inoculate our children against much of the garbage that's out there.
I mean, it is truly, truly frightening. And I think now, more than ever, now in the past 2 years, parents really were kind of shaken awake in so many respects because of COVID, because people saw what their kids were learning at school. A lot of it they found rather shocking and upsetting. And they said, well, for so long, I kind of feel like we've been a little complacent maybe. We thought we just send our kids to school, they're taught what they need to learn, they get the most out of it possible. We do a little at home too. But people really had to wake up and take an accounting of what was going on with their kids, what was going on with our entire educational system here in America. And I think you're right. I think there are a lot of parents out there that are seeking some way to make sure that they get, the values that they have enjoyed growing up into their own children. And PragerU, I just have to say, you guys do amazing work. All of your videos, all of your content. We've had some folks from PragerU, Amala, Will Witt. How did PragerU come about? Because I think all of a sudden it's kind of become a really big deal, especially lately because of the situations that so many of us have found ourselves in with kids in school and wanting to learn more and wanting to learn more ourselves.
Yeah, so PragerU started about 11 years ago in my kitchen. I'm not much of a garage person, so I describe it as a kitchen. So I used to run a school, and then I ran a nonprofit. And then one day, Dennis Prager and his best friend, Alan Estrin, who's the producer of the Dennis Prager radio show, came to me and said, Marissa, America is sick. And Dennis Prager has penicillin for the mind, and he has medicine for the mind, and we need to figure out a way to get it out there and to as many people as possible. And we can use the internet because everybody has a screen and everybody has access to the internet. What is the fastest way we can get truth to people? Because lies are being told everywhere, and the opportunity to learn is basically being robbed one day at a time from people. With this kind of replacement of different type of curriculums that are just terrible. So they came up with this concept of Prager University, PragerU, and at first we really focused on high school, college students and up. How do we teach what is not being taught in college? Once upon a time, the university was a place where you would hear diverse ideas and you would be able to wrestle with them and you would come up with your own opinion about something. Well, now universities are the least free place in America, I guess, next to Hollywood. Hollywood is also not the freest place in America anymore. But between those two places, there's America is becoming less and less free. And so they said, well, let's create a digital enterprise that can reach millions of people, and essentially anybody who wants can have access to it. We will never charge because we just want people to be able to get smarter. And so if you're intellectually starving, PragerU is here to feed you and nourish your mind. And so for the first 10 years, we predominantly produced these 5-minute videos. We produced shows like the Will Witt, Man on the Street. We met Amala. We did a lot of work with Candace Owens and many others that I'm sure you know. And then 2 years ago, we realized that we need to take things to a whole nother level and widen the audience because little kids need us too. So there's information that needs to be taught for little ones. And so we went from teaching, 16 and up to teaching to 4-year-olds and up. And what I say by teaching is we use a medium called edutainment, educational entertainment. And I use this example of how many times do you think my son Aiden will do his homework? He's 9. Well, one time. He'll do his homework maybe one time. How many times will he watch his favorite show? 10 times. You have kids too?
Right.
And so you would agree, right? They memorize their favorite characters and they enjoy it. And so entertainment is the best way to teach a child because they'll fall in love with it. They won't do it forcefully and they'll engage in it and they'll remember. And I think it's not just a child, it's for us too, right? Grown-ups, if we're entertained, we're more likely to remember and learn. And so that's what PragerU has become. We've become this edutainment platform where, if you want pure entertainment, that's not what PragerU is. There are many other platforms that can provide you that. But if you want nourishment for your mind, if you want to say, I'm going to carve out a couple of hours a week to get smarter, And so at the next cocktail party or Thanksgiving party, I know the answers to some of life's most important questions. And it's not all political, but obviously, if you're stronger and more capable mentally, and if you know how to critically think, you'll ultimately make better decisions about everything that you will do in life. And so that is our idea, is to empower people really through entertainment that is educational. And by having a better educated population, we believe that people will be happier, they will think healthier, and all of us will have a better future. And that is kind of the concept. And so it started in my kitchen. Now we have our studios here in Los Angeles, the belly of the beast. We have 100 employees here, everybody churning away, working as hard as possible to fill up the pantry so that we make sure that people of all walks of life can walk in, download PragerU app or go into PragerU.com and just kind of get smarter whenever they want.
Yeah, and by the way, this is the time to do it, because there is so much, it's funny because you always hear about disinformation, misinformation, and it always comes from folks on the left. But the truth is that there is so much of it out there that to really truly learn something, I mean, it's the best thing you could possibly do for yourself, for your family, for your kids. I think what you guys are doing is so important. What has the response been like? I mean, I imagine the growth you guys have seen in the past couple of years must have been pretty huge.
I mean, our growth is explosive, and we have millions of views every single day. I think we're at 4 or 5 million views every day. One of my favorite statistics is that 300,000 parents and educators have subscribed to our network over the last year. And these are brand new followers to PragerU. I don't think they even knew what PragerU was before. But as you are seeing, parents and educators are waking up. They're realizing that they've been misinformed or lied to. And you're right, the lockdowns have really woken people up to realize that there is truth that they have not had access to. And so our growth has been explosive. I sat next to a young woman on a plane the other day and had an entire hour conversation with her, and got her to realize that there is a whole world of information that she never had access to, even though she went to an Ivy League college. And she was just completely floored by it. And she started watching PragerU, binge watching PragerU. And, now she's like, you know what, I'm smarter now, because you are smarter when you can hear an alternative perspective. Yeah. And that is the whole point of PragerU. You may not agree with every video we have. I guarantee you there are pieces of content on our platform that you may look at and say, well, I don't quite agree with that. But the exercise of listening to something that you may not agree with is exactly what we all need in order to expand our intellectual bandwidth, right? Yeah. How terrible it is that we're creating the system in America where people are just allergic to opposing points of view, where I want people to be craving opposing points of view so that once they hear them, they don't fall apart and they can actually make their own decisions about things. And I think this is a conservative soundbite that we always say, right? Like, let us debate you, hear an alternative point of view, but the left won't let you hear the alternative point of view. You know how many times we've invited folks on the left to come debate us? They don't want to debate us. And why is that?
So interesting. Yeah. Right. Well, why is that? Because they're afraid that what they kind of put out there, I assume that it's just gonna be negated immediately, and they'll realize, I don't know, are they afraid of the truth? What are they afraid of? It's a good question.
Yes, they're afraid of the truth. And that's why it's always ad hominem attack. It's always, oh, you're an anti-Semite. You're a racist. You're anti-women, right? All of these, I'm like, I'm a woman. How can you call me? I'm like, I'm Jewish. How can you call me? But no, they'll just attack us. It's ad hominem attacks. They don't attack our ideas. And so eventually we figured out, well, let's put our ideas out there in the clearest way possible for every single age, and let people make their own decisions about things, because the truth ultimately will help people live a better life.
Yeah, and it is a scary time right now. I feel like just as a whole in our country, that we are approaching a place where there is very little diversity of thought. It used to be, and I guess our country was founded on a diversity of ideas and a marketplace of ideas, and coming to the table and talking about things with people who disagreed with you and didn't agree with you. You don't want to exist in an echo chamber, because then you don't learn anything and nothing gets better. And it is a little frightening that we've all had it happen on the right, for sure. Whether it's on a social media platform or in different scenarios where we're just basically shut down and shut off, and if someone doesn't agree with what we say, they just don't want anything to do with it and they just want to completely turn us off. That does not bode well for the future of our country if we continue down a path like that, though. So I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. I thank you for doing it as a mom of two kids. Mine are 2 and 4. But now that I know you have content for 4-year-olds, I'll certainly get my kids in front of it for sure, because I think it's the most important thing that we could do, is to make sure that we have everything out there and available to people so that they can critically think and make their own decisions.
I mean, you talk about censorship. It's mind-boggling that YouTube censors PragerU. We have a series on the 10 Commandments, and I mean, it's a total biblical lesson.
What do they say? Why do they say they censor you? What's their
You know what they say? Well, one of them has the word murder in it, because you shall not murder. And so that's their excuse for censoring one of the 10 Commandments. You know, a lot of history videos, and so some of them explain why America fought the Vietnam War or the Korean War. They don't like our perspective on that one, you know, and so if God forbid you teach history and American exceptionalism, and so that is censored. It's also why I really highly encourage people to download the PragerU app or to just subscribe to PragerU directly, because if they only watch PragerU through YouTube, ultimately you're allowing YouTube to decide what you get to watch and what you don't get to watch. But that's exactly what they do. It's either ad hominem attack or they outright take you out. Once you become too sophisticated and too big, they start targeting you and censoring you.
Well, I like to think that that's why they attack our families so much, but I digress. We don't have enough time for that. I have to ask you, because we ask everyone that comes on our show, Marissa, what do you think is the best part of America, and what do you think is the biggest threat to the future of our country?
The best part of America is that I still believe it's the greatest country on God's green earth. You know, the Bill of Rights, obviously, and the Constitution and everything that it's been founded on. You know, freedom of speech, I think, is so incredibly important. It's why I fight so hard for it. And what worries me is the targeting of our children, really just, you know, outright brainwash from the media all the way through children's content and then obviously education. And that worries me a lot. What kind of makes me happy is the fact that many parents are waking up and they're going to fight back. And I think we just need to rally them to just be aware of what's happening in our schools so that we don't let them, you know, ruin this incredible gem of a country that we have.
Wow, so true, so true. Well, again, thank you for all that you guys do. I think it's just for a time like we have found ourselves in right now in America, there couldn't be something more important than to give another perspective, you know, compared to what else you hear out there. So I think you guys are truly doing incredible work. Marissa, thank you for joining us, and I encourage everyone to check out PragerU if you haven't. I'm sure a lot of our audience already knows about you guys and listens to you and follows you, but make sure you check it out. So Marissa Streit, thank you so much for joining us on The Right View. To everybody at home, as always, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next time.